see what's present for you from the discussion that we had. And I was telling somebody the fact that I was on the panel with Gloria Latson Billings, I was like, is anybody going to be in my breakout room? But then I heard it was just rotational. I was like, all right, I felt good because she's the grande dame of the situation. So I felt humbled to be with her. But any questions or any things that really are just plaguing you that you'd like to ask, or anything that's troubling, anything that you took away from that panel discussion that's left you with some questions? I'm curious to hear from you. No. So y'all got this anti-racist education down. Y'all got this handled. If not, we could go drink some coffee or something. So
I'll ask a question, Dr. Ellington. My name is Alice Cook. I work in Baltimore City Schools, and I also teach high schoolers in Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Where do you work in Baltimore?
I work in about 30 different schools, but I live on the west side. Are you familiar with Baltimore?
I live in Baltimore.
Oh, yay. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I live in Baltimore. I teach at Morgan. So yeah, I'm very familiar with Baltimore.
I live maybe 6 or 7 blocks from Carver High School. Also,
okay.
From Augusta Fells. Yeah. Okay, that's exciting. The question I wanted to ask you about was at the very beginning of the panel discussion, you were speaking on, well, actually, you and Dr. Latson Billings were speaking on excellence, specifically with Amanda Gordon, and you had said, you were talking about how many children, right? How many children are excellent and are just not seen and not acknowledged, and particularly Black children. And as you live in Baltimore City, so we both know Baltimore City Schools is predominantly African American Black student population. And I've thought a lot about this as a teacher educator, to shifting mindsets of my teachers who are not from here. How do I shift them from thinking of my children as, or thinking of my students? And I say my children too, because I'm a foster parent. My kids are in school here. Like, how do I help support them shift to thinking of my children as excellent all the time, every day when they walk in the classroom?
That's a really good question. So the first part, when I started the conversation, is somebody had mentioned about, and I talked about humanity. So the first part, before we even get to a foundation of excellence, we got to actually deal with this idea that Black and brown children, particularly Black children who are descendants of enslaved people, have been commodified and not seen as humans. So let's start with the humanity first, right? So I say we can't talk about excellence until we talk about how we see different people and how we interpret their behavior from a lens called their human children, as opposed to their criminals, their problems. So I hear a lot of teachers talk about kids being problems. And I noticed that when certain other kids, maybe white male children, display certain behaviors, they're not problematized in the same way as Black children are. So the first part is, I say, when you see someone treating someone as if they're not human, or there's some kind of label, you might want to, that's the first place to start, and say, be curious. It sounds like when you interpret this person's behavior, you made them the problem. Let's actually address that, because this behavior is pretty standard for children. Children gonna act out, they not gonna listen, right? That's just what children do. This idea that somehow you're problematizing the child because they are distributing behaviors that you wouldn't prefer is the first issue. So let's start there. Then we can talk about what it means to be excellent, and then how do you look at children from a perspective of an asset as opposed to a deficiency. That's another issue I've seen. I work in math. I used to do a lot of professional development with AP calculus, and so I thought it was very interesting that when I was working with AP calculus teachers, how you could be in a predominantly Black school, but when you look at the AP calculus strand, you got all white teachers and white students. I thought that was perplexing. So the first question I would say is, when you're talking about, quote, supporting people in their different view, you first got to point out, where is the inhumanity happening? Where are we seeing children from a lens of their problems, they're an issue, they're this, they're that? And I'm gonna tell you something, working with minority students in predominantly Black spaces, if you treat them like a problem, they will be a problem. Let me just tell you straight up. You frame them as a problem, they'll show up as a problem because they're used to this marginalization. They've internalized it. So that's the first thing. Anytime you see anything that feels or looks like lack of humanity, labeling, I say call that out. And then the second thing is, are we really looking for excellence in ways that don't fit our descriptions, right? So, I used to teach at Northwestern High School in Baltimore City, and I would tell students, like, I would point out students and say, hey, you're going into the trigonometry class, whether you like it or not. I see it. You're gonna ride with what I see. And they'd be like, Miss Ellington, what are you talking about? I don't even like math. That's not your business. Come on, we gonna go and you gonna learn to like it. And actually, one of my students that I actually pulled into that course ended up being my first doctoral student. His father, I think, put him in, and he was like, you remember me? And he actually now has a doctoral degree in math education. Okay. So you have no idea about where people can be, but you just want to relate to them as, you know what, you have this excellence. And even if you don't see it, I see it. And I guarantee you, if that's the way you're looking at them and it's an earnest way, they will rise to your expectations. It sounds trite, but it's real, because they do have excellence, because they're human beings. All human beings are bestowed with a certain level of excellence. It may show up different ways, but I believe in the divinity of man. So if I say you are my brother and we are human beings, then that already assumes that there's some excellence in you that I can actually draw out. But it's the view. I think it's the lack of humanity is the first part. So that's my short answer.
We have a question in the chat from Jackie about reframing it for like an asset space. So she wants to know if you could speak a bit more on reframing it in real time when others are using deficit-based language about young people, specifically with Black and Brown young students.
So this is my question. So I go around the country talking about what I call a transformative framework for STEM education. That's my area. And one of the pieces of that is looking at communities with a social and cultural capital lens, looking at the social and cultural capital, not only that communities bring, but the assets that students bring. So the first thing is, do you really see your students as an asset? Don't fake that. Like, you cannot fake the funk, as my students would say. If you don't see the asset, then the question is, why not? Because assume it's there. That's the first thing. The thing I would like assume that everybody has an asset. Now, it might not show up the way you want it. They may actually operate in ways that you wouldn't approve. But when you start to say, you know what, there's a gem here. There's something here about this. And it's particularly the ones who act out, because I always used to say, if you really didn't care, you wouldn't act out. See, to me, I'm always worried about those students who are indifferent than I am the students that are quote unquote acting out. Because when you act out, there's some commitment there. So when a student is showing you behaviors that are not quote unquote the best behaviors, or they might be acting out in certain ways, take the case that they actually care enough to act out. Because the ones who don't, they don't even deal with you. They just check out, and most people ignore them. So the first thing is really get that there's an asset there, particularly your students that act out, and then start to ask them. See, that's enough. I mean, we don't ask students we teach them, but we don't ask students anything about who they are, what they're up to, what game they're playing, what things they're good at, what things they like. We don't even ask. So the first question is ask. My dissertation research came from this notion of, if we want to know what high achieving students, how to create high achieving students, why not ask the high achieving students? That was just a question. I was like, well, if you want to know how to help someone be successful, talk to the ones who are successful and see what they tell you. It sounds so basic, but my whole dissertation came out of that one question. So again, I started to ask students who were doing well, who demonstrated assets, what was it that what created that? Who are they? What were they about? And I learned so much about their assets based on asking them. I just ask. Anytime you want, they say, ask and it shall be given. And you'll be surprised. And if you listen from it's already there, you'll start to hear it. And then when you hear it, you make note of it. And then you start to incorporate their assets into the way you instruct. So for example, I would have a student, He used to give me the blues, right? Ah, he was getting Northwestern High School at the time when I was teaching there. It was rough. People was doing all kind of stuff. And this student gave me the blues. And I was like, okay, this brother got something to offer. Like, what is it? So I went there after class and said, come here. I think his name was Jamel or Jamal, something like that. I said, Jamel, come here. You give me the blues. And I like you. I think there's something there for you. And he was like, Miss Ellington, I ain't tripping off this. Here's what I'm interested in. I think it was something around, he was interested in music or he was in something. He said, I'm just here. And I said, well, listen, would you partner with me in bringing in what you like into what I'm doing so we can actually have a win-win? And he thought about it. And he was like, all right, I'll get back to you. I said, all right, cool, get back to me. Because I really see something here that I want to bring into what I'm up to. So let's partner and see what that is. I'm gonna tell you, after that conversation, anybody who tried to come for me, he'd be like, yo, Miss Ellington, all right, yo, don't do that, yo. And he would just literally like shut all of it down. She really trying, yo, so let's try. And he would actually, I don't know how this came about, but was something about that conversation that honored his asset, which was music. And so we started thinking about how we could bring math into music. I remember one time I did an experience where kids were eating chicken boxes at the time, and I don't eat grease and chicken, but they was really into which chicken box was the best chicken box and which one wasn't. So literally what I tried to do was help them look at that from a mathematical lens. Was it about cost? Was it about flavor? Was it about weight of chicken? Like we started to really think about, when you start talking about the best chicken box in Baltimore, what are you talking about? And so again, it really is about looking, it's about asking, it's about partnering. And then you'll see that their relationship to you will shift and you will start to see it. The brilliance will start to, you will see it because you're looking for it. I don't think everybody's always looking for that brilliance in our kids. They're looking for the problem. They're looking for the issue. They're looking to fix something. And nobody wants to be somebody's fixer-upper. Nobody wants you fixing them because they're not broken. They may have behaviors that you don't prefer, or they may be inappropriate in certain behaviors, but that's a function of them feeling marginalized from the situation. And until we start to look at it that way, as opposed to problematizing them, making them an issue, making punishment the one way to go, and it can be challenging to do that in the face of certain behaviors. I'm not saying that wasn't easy. That was easy. But when I did that, I swear my relationship, and he would handle things. I say, I'm gonna get Jamal on you. And they'd be like, all right, yo, y'all, we don't want to be up with him because he like you now. And I was like, okay, you know what I'm saying? So that's how I did it. I just asked. It sounds so basic. I wish I had something real deep and profound to say, but it's basic humanity. We don't treat kids like people, like human beings, how you want to be treated. We don't do that for whatever reason. I don't understand it, but that's how we've been trained. So somebody got another question? Somebody said, I'm thinking about advocacy and how you speak into the piece of what is possible when there is an overwhelming deficit in language at decision-making levels with people who do not have direct interaction with young people. So here's what I also want to tell you. There are things that you can control and there are things that you can't. I literally don't have conversations about things that are out of my control. I cannot control what other people, if I'm not at that level, I can't control it. Now we can do that, but it just doesn't, it's not helpful. So yes, there are people who operate in the lens that they operate. It's interesting. I was, as I was coming here, I went to the gym and then I came here and I always listen to the red radio, like the radio stations with the people, the Trump supporters. And I listen to that radio. And sometimes it's hard to listen to because I'm just like, I can't, but I do it. You know why? Because it helps me understand where they're coming from. And I can't control where they're coming from, but I tell you what, if I ever got in a conversation with them, I'm so in their world that I can actually break down the arguments that they have for how they see things. Not like a attack, but like, oh, this is your assumption. So I was listening to the radio and they were talking about critical race theory in education. And they was like, that's a bad thing. They just going in on CRT. Right? So I was listening. At first I was getting cringy. You know how you listen to something, you just cringe. You're like, they have no idea. But I said, Roni, listen. See, you don't have any say over what they believe, but you do have a say on you listening. So if you start listening to the people in charge, you will start to hear where they're coming from. And you'll be able to speak to that if you have an opportunity. Some of us will never be in a room with the decision makers. But if you ever are, and you know where people are coming from and you get their world, you can speak to their world and make a difference. You cannot insult and inspire people at the same time. Even though I don't necessarily like where Trump supporters are coming from, but if I'm insulting them, their ego is going to get triggered and it's going to be a problem. But if I get in their world and go, okay, this is where they're coming from. Now, I don't agree with their fundamental assumptions, and I'm a mathematician. So I understand the importance of assumptions, how people build arguments, the logic. Everybody's logic makes sense to them. Remember that. Everybody's logic makes sense to them. Now, they don't make sense to them. So the more you can get into their world and get their logic, the more you can make a difference with them. But on a day-to-day basis, if I'm not around decision makers, all I can do is do what's in my prayer view and start to bring forth what I see is valuable. That's all I can do. I can't worry about who can't and the Trump and the people up there. And like I'm in a school of education. I can't worry about the dean and what she's doing. All I can do is worry about what's in my prayer view. And if I have an opportunity to make a difference with decision makers, I cannot insult and inspire at the same time. You can't do it with children. You can't do it with anybody. You insult them, they're defensive, period. If you're trying to make a difference, then try to make the difference you're trying to make by getting in their world, speaking to their logic, and helping them see a new way. It's all you can ever do with human beings. Again, it goes back to humanity. This is a human thing, not a us against them thing. It's a human thing. I hope that was helpful. So do what you can in your sphere of influence. And whenever you have an opportunity to speak to decision makers, get in their world, because they're human beings too. You may not agree with them. They may have ego BS happening, but they're out to make a difference. You just got to figure out how they're thinking about it. That may not be the best approach for what you know to be happening in the school. And if you can inspire them to see something new, that's the best thing. But if you insult them, and I used to be insulting people. Let me tell you, I've done it where I've been going for people's jugular. And I'm like, Roni, all you did was create an adversary, and that's not helpful. So that's all I got. Thank you. Thank you for your questions. And I just want to leave you with, if you really are committed to anti-racist education, you're literally going to have to start. I say it's the water we swim in. Racism is the water we swim in. It feels as natural in America as apple pie. If you're not constantly interrogating your perspectives, knowing that they are driven by racist ideology, take the case, you're perpetuating it, because it's going to require that level of rigor. Because it's just the lens that we've inherited. It's not personal. It's just the culture we grew up in. We are trained to see white children a particular way. We just are.
And that is such perfect timing, because we're about to move to the next group and rotate with Dr. Ellington. So huge thanks from, I know, EDCO, and especially everyone on this small group. You guys will be seeing another guest and their EDCO peeps in seconds.
Thank you. Do I leave the room, Natalie, or I stay right here?
You stay right here. We're going to get moved.
Okay.
Yes.
Amanda will pick us up and drop us somewhere else.
Okay, is for our students, right? When I think about it, go ahead. Is it time to switch?
Yes.
It's time to flip that record, Mr. Hughes. Sorry, man. We're going to the next one.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, y'all have a good one.
You too.
All right. Hey, everybody. We are here with Dr. Ellington, wanting to be super mindful of time. We are going to be together for the next 19-ish minutes. So I want to invite people to unmute, shout out your questions, and we will get started with Dr. Ellington. Amy and I will be here for support and help and just making sure the conversation's going.
So I want to ask like the next group, are there any burning questions? And with me, y'all, the more authentic and straight the questions are, the better. Like, you ain't got to be politically correct with me. You ain't got to temper yourself, because I don't do that. I really get that the fact you're here on a Saturday, you have a commitment to forward something. So I really do invite you to bring that level of authenticity without this protection. In this 20 minutes, you get to be unprotected, because I ain't got nothing on whatever you got to say. Trust me. I appreciate the honesty and the authenticity. So I just wanted to give you permission to just say it like it is. Okay. And I put on my lip gloss for y'all, so y'all gotta say something, because you know, it's Saturday. I had to kind of look like something on these video streams.
Well, I can start with something.
Sure.
So this year, I teach 5th grade social studies here in Nashville. And I had a situation, I teach early American history, and I was teaching about enslavement. And I teach with a lot of primary sources. And this particular inquiry was based on how the Institute of Enslavement was beyond the plantation, how basically it was woven into our economy. And so I had different primary sources from Nashville that showed how insurance companies insured enslaved people, clothing companies trying to sell clothing to plantations for their enslaved people, you know, so how the banks were involved, and the brokers and so forth. And for the first time, I've done this for years, but I did have a Black family that was, the daughter was fine, but the parents were not fine with this content. And, you know, I spoke to him. It was great. We had great dialogue with it. We spoke for over an hour. I teach at an independent school, and they said, you know, we're sending her here to protect her. And we really don't have these companies. He worked in the insurance company too. And goes, now I have to explain to her that what I did was something that was involved in with slavery. And so anyway, it was difficult for me, because I felt like what I did in my classroom caused a ripple of pain beyond my classroom. You know, I talked to the child. I was like, I am so sorry. And she's like, Ms. Fink, I'm fine. I'm fine. It's my parents, but I'm fine. I'm like, but I just want to let you know, if I have caused you any trauma or pain, I so apologize. How do you, and you know, I'm Latina, but I'm not Black. So I can't, I'm not in those shoes as a parent too. Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts around that? What should I
no, you shouldn't. So let me tell you something. Y'all need to stop shitting on yourself. Let's stop that. Because, and I said this, I did a talk yesterday for Texas teachers. I did a Texas talk, y'all. It went well, but that's a whole nother story. And one of the things I shared with them was, you really do have to get out of this mindset of right, wrong, good, bad, whatever. If you're going to do this work, particularly around anti-racism, you literally have to understand that human beings are very messy, and you are going to step on toes, but you can clean it up. And you did that. So it literally, you didn't do anything wrong. You literally were teaching an idea and someone had a reaction. That's what human beings do. That's why I always go back to this notion of humanity. You got to understand human beings. Human beings is particularly when we're in our ego perception, we have certain triggers that trigger us. And you don't always know what you're going to trigger. To be out here trying to avoid every trigger, you will not do anything. Think about it. If you're in a relationship, a marriage, I have a boyfriend and I'm triggering him and we together and we, you know what I mean? So this idea that you're going to be in anti-racist conversations, or you're going to be bringing out structural inequities and racism, and somehow it's not going to trigger, is to me, it's just ridiculous. I don't even understand how you can do that. But what you did was brilliant. When you realize, you didn't dismiss the family and was like, and nor did you stop. See, that's, I don't want y'all, especially white people, I don't want y'all to acquiesce or get defensive. There's what I call, as the Buddhists call, there's a middle way. And what that is it's honoring people's experience and sharing where you're coming from, so that people can understand where you're coming from and y'all can create some win-win around it, right? So you had a goal to really uncover the racist and the structural inequities in systems across the country. That is noble. The fact that you were doing that, I'll give you a hands up. And a Black parent felt a way about it. And you actually reached out and got curious. Well, tell me what's happening. To me, you did it masterfully. You get curious. Oh, I'm not gonna make them wrong or acquiesce. Don't do that, y'all. Like we're human beings. We can take it. Like I hate this whole, we so traumatized. Black people so traumatized you can't say anything. I'm not that person. I believe you can, but you need to honor people's experience. And you did that by reaching out and having a real dialogue. You said it was an hour long. You got an understanding of their world. But I think the apologizing, and I think that's why even when I listen to what I call red radio, all the people who are, the red states, and I listen to Republican radio all the time because I love to get like, where are these people coming from? One of the things they say is they feel like white people got to apologize all the time. And I don't believe that. I believe that we're human beings. We're going to step on each other's toes. People are going to have certain reactions, but you're big enough to address it head on. And you did that.
Well, let me ask you a follow-up on that. So she told me that, because I asked her how she would have done it differently. And she said, I would, when it comes to those deep, raw topics, just simmer and saute on other things. She goes, but she said, lecture instead of pulling out primary sources, and just quickly go over. So I
well,
listened
that's her opinion, and you get to decide how you want to incorporate that. Again, I'm not the person to you have a certain expertise and you do what you do. And you could say, you know what, I will consider that. Okay. And then you share where you're coming from. Why are you using primary sources? What are you trying to accomplish? But you got to be clear about what you're trying to accomplish. So when they give you ideas, you can just share your perspective. And I always believe there's always a win-win in the middle. Mm-hmm. It's not an either or, it's a both and. We live in this world of either or, right, wrong, but there's always a both and. I believe that from my soul. Gotcha. That there is a way for people to win, but you got to be willing to go through the messiness of humanity. And people aren't willing to go through that. That's why we get divorced when things go to the left. That's why people break up, because we as humans, and particularly Americans, we have very little tolerance for the discord that gets us to the peace on the other side. We have so little tolerance for that. We don't like to be uncomfortable. We don't want to make nobody uncomfortable. And I'm like, look, nobody died of being uncomfortable. There's no cause of death. They were uncomfortable. Like, what is that? But if you come in earnest with where you're coming from, and if where you're coming from is from a pure place, all you can do is negotiate that with the people you serve. That's all you can do. But please don't give it up. And now you got to acquiesce because somebody had an opinion. You can actually hear it and say, you know what, there's a way maybe I can incorporate that. But I don't say give up your primary source discussion or give it all up and throw it all, the baby out with the bathwater. I recommend you not do that.
Thank you.
Welcome. As long as you're not insulting people, I said this in the last meeting, you can't insult and inspire at the same time. Just don't insult people.
Right.
And that's what I learned from listening to a lot of red radio, I call it, is we as on the quote left with the, with the critical race theory and the anti-racist and all that, there are people who really are threatened by that ideology. And just like you have a right to your view, they do too. However, there is something to be said about our humanity. What I'm not going to do is acquiesce to my humanity because you have a problem with my humanity. That's what we're not going to do. Just like you get to make choices, so do I. And I take it from the Buddhists, as long as I'm not doing any harm and I'm not coming from a harmful place, we can always negotiate what's in our best interest. But that's messy. I ain't gonna front. It's messy. Y'all know in relationships it's messy. What makes you think it's not gonna be messy in teaching? And this is people we done decided to marry and sleep with, and we think that that's messy, but we expect school to be like, doo. That's crazy talk. Anyway, I'm sorry, that's crazy talk. So, and you have everything you need and you're well equipped to address it. Just honor people, respect their view, don't insult, and just get curious. When people are triggered, I get curious now. Ooh, they got triggered by what I said. Okay, what came up for you? Because here's where I was coming from. Tell me where your world is and actually listen. Don't defend. Don't explain. Just listen. Take notes if you have to. Shut up and just get their world. And then you can speak to their world and let them know where you're coming from and just come, try to get in the middle. That middle way, as the Buddhists always say, there's a middle way. So it's all about humanity. We don't know, we human beings, but we have very little facility of people's humanity. So, yeah. Danielle! You know what? I got to see you on a screen, but we're going to talk about that later. That's one of my students. Hey, Danielle!
Hey, Dr. Ellington.
Any other questions? I only get 20 minutes and probably I'm at 9 now because with that speech there. And I say sometimes you may have to call people out, but you can do it in a way that doesn't insult them. Don't get it twisted. Danielle will tell you, I'm not no punk. I'm going to say what I need to say, but I can do it in a way that honors people, but I don't have to back down. Acquiescing is not the same. Like, y'all, this acquiescing we out here doing. See, what I do respect about the people on the right, they don't acquiesce. They say what they mean and they mean what they say. But those of us on the left, and I use that real loosely, those of us who are anti-racist and about equity, we always apologize and stop that. I can still deal with you and not have to apologize for everything. So say your piece, just like they say their piece. We equal, we human beings. You get your piece, I get mine, but there's somewhere in the middle that we can actually come together. So don't y'all be out here being no wimpy anti-racist educators. That ain't gonna work.
I think you need to run for office.
Oh, really?
Yes.
No, I got too much in my background. They go dig into my background. They, oh no. Like, no, but no. But thank you for that. But no, I couldn't do that. Because they don't talk
Let it
about
simmer.
I'll let it simmer. Okay, I'll let it simmer. Did anybody else have a question, comment, something they just are grappling with in their practice that they would love to share? And again, you don't have to be politically correct with me because I got thick skin. So say what's right there. I know something right there. Y'all not saying it.
I do have a question, but does someone want to jump in? Because I already talked a lot last time. Okay. My question is, whenever I'm lesson planning this year, I've really dove into make it a great conversation around culture and equity and trying to make it as diverse as possible, even just for exposure for students. But what I kind of struggle with is I'm very aware that, I'm a white lady, so it's coming through the mindset of a white lady. But the last thing I want to do is go to my parapro and be like, oh, you're Black, let me get your insight. I don't want to force someone to be a representative of their entire race or culture.
Yeah, don't do that. That's a good punch. Don't do that. Okay.
Yeah. So what's a good approach, I guess, to get insight from someone else without forcing them to be a representative and a spokesperson, if that makes sense?
This is a very interesting. So thank you for the question and the transparency, right? But here's what I don't understand. And I have some friends who I go to church with who are white, and I always ask them my white people questions. Let me ask you this white person question. Y'all are real good at researching all kinds of stuff. Why would this becomes a problem? People Googling, we got all kind of stuff at our fingertips. Literally, as a researcher, I'm like, just like you research best practices in science education and math, when you teach in calculus, you look for resources that reflect whatever you're teaching. It literally becomes a research project. And then you literally okay, I'm clear my lens. What are some other lenses that exist? You just research it. And then you start to come away with, you do some due diligence, you vet out certain things. And then the best vetters is, to me, the students. You bring back your ideas. See, that's another thing. I said this in the last meeting. We all out here trying to teach students, and we don't partner with them. We don't ask them nothing. We think they're like these empty vessels. So as you start saying, you can actually say, look, y'all, I'm grappling with this. I want to teach this. I'm transparent. I want to teach this. Here, I'm coming from this perspective. I've researched and came away with these. What are y'all thoughts of the way we can think about this? You see, and it's a human being conversation, because you recognize that getting one Black person's opinion is not the perspectives of Black people in general. I'm so glad you don't do that. But there's also books, there's short articles, there are all kinds of things on these interweb streets that you can consult. So white people get real funny acting around stuff like this, but we don't get funny acting when I'm asking you to teach anything else, right? If I want to learn about Shakespeare, I go find different resources and different viewpoints on Shakespeare, and then I integrate them. It's no different with anti-racist and culture responsive teaching. You do your due diligence. And then you vet it.
I think I had, like, that question kind of stems from an experience I had where our school had a panel and we were doing a professional development of like anti-racism. And it was a panel of white women that were telling us. And I left the meeting being like, oh my gosh, that was amazing. I learned so much. And then I started talking to my coworkers, which have totally different and various cultural backgrounds, and they all hated it. And it was really interesting to get their perspective on it. But then that got me really aware. I'm like, if I don't have these conversations with people, like, I'm going to just keep saying what I think is right based on what other white people are telling me and what I'm learning. And so I want to be like as informed as possible without, I guess that's where the should comes from, but I don't want to insult anyone either.
Right. And but again, it's messy. And that's what I'm saying. It's no like roadmap. Being with human beings is messy. You see the world through the lens you see the world through. You can't help it. It's the water you swim in. The question I'm going to ask you is the fact that you are drying off, noticing new perspectives, incorporating them tells me that you're willing to adjust your perspectives, but you can't help but see the world the way you see it. You're a white woman. You see the world as a white woman. Okay, you saw you had a PD that was great for you. Then you talk to other people and they wasn't. Then you get curious. You got curious. Oh, well, what happened? What did you see? And then what you did was expand your perspective. That's what it means to grow and evolve as an anti-racist educator. That you did it perfectly. But y'all want to circumvent that part. You want to just know what to do and not do that. I've been doing this for 20 years. I still don't. Because even as a Black woman, I had certain experiences that other Blacks could be telling me, you know, my students, my children, my child and her girlfriend be like, no, that's not the case. In particular around LGBTQ things, my daughter's a lesbian, and certain things that my worldview is very heteronormative. And I be doing things wrong, quote unquote, all the time. I just get curious. Well, Naja, tell me what I'm doing. No, don't do that, right? And then we just have a conversation. So this is messy. And you're never, ever going to dismiss the mess. It's just part of it, but you'll get better as you get open. I say be open, be curious, get into someone else's world, and be willing to expand your worldview and understand it's just your worldview and that there are many other worldviews. And they're just as valid as yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ellington. We have about 10 seconds left in this room together. So we will be whisked away and join another group as our panelists and EDCO friends join this group. So thank you so much for the questions. Thank you so much for the insights. And I can't wait to see what like growth and development and change comes out of this.
Thank you, Dr.
Yeah, be
Ellington.
self-reflective, y'all. Just be open and keep interrogating stuff. That's all I say. You're constantly interrogating where you're coming from and what you're up to. It's ongoing. It never stops. It's never handled. I know that's disturbing, right? It's never handled. Just like relationships are never handled, y'all. Marriages are never handled, and nothing's ever handled with human beings. Because if it was, we'd be like,
hello, everyone.
And here we are. Dr.
There she
Dr.
is.
Ellington is joining us for this last 20 minutes with our panelist. I know that you guys have had some like great questions.
Y'all was with Gloria. I feel like once you get to me, I'm like, look, Gloria Latson-Villa is the grand dame of it all. I was like, when I was on a panel with her, I was like, ooh, okay, what do you say?
Oh yeah,
So,
we're fancy. But we've got Dr. Ellington and we've got about 20 minutes. So I will let you all just pepper her with your questions as this is our last opportunity.
y'all thinking? Okay, I'll let y'all think.
There's always those awkward seconds where people are like, should I? Not yet.
One, I just want to acknowledge you guys for being here on a Saturday. Like, I'm just impressed. I know what teachers have to go through. And the fact that you're here, I just want to give you a public acknowledgement that this must matter to at some level for you to actually take time out to be here. So thank you for being here. That's what I want to say. Because you could be doing other things like going to the grocery store or just chilling, but you're here to really get some information or some takeaways around this topic. So thank you. All right. With that said, don't let me have to call on people, because I will. Because if I think you got something to say and you're not saying it, I might do it. Like the brother, what's your name, brother? Tyree.
That would be me. Good
Hi,
morning.
Tyree. You got anything going on? And you look real like you was in thought. Anything, just share with us what you've been thinking about. I'd just love to hear what you're thinking about.
I would love to do that because I hear this expression, drinking from a fire hose, sometimes, and I feel like that's what I've been doing this morning in these 20 segments. There's just been so much. I hear just top level scholars and top level administrators telling me that they support the work that I want to do in dismantling the system that is not serving our children and put them first. And this is something that we hear a lot, but then to see that that there's something backing up, this feels new, and it's one of the many new things that is happening, I think, just in this year when everybody is rethinking everything because of what we've all gone through. It just culturally, in the media, in the courts, and the environment, and health-wise. There's so many opportunities going on, and they're just kind of all hitting me at the same time. One of the things that I've been thinking about since the beginning is like really just listening to the students, and how, if we're going to be culturally responsive, like to me, the thing that, I've heard the term before, I've heard people talk about it, I've read about it, but just emphasizing the responsive part, like that word, like we're here to respond. That's a dialogue, that's a conversation. That's not me telling the students what it is they need to know. That's another word, co-constructing what's going on. And that's giving the kids a lot of power. And that's really scary in this, especially in this world, because the things that they want to talk about are the things that matter. It's race, sex, it's class, it's all of this stuff. And whether it's pre-K, middle school, or high school, that's a really tricky territory to be in. And just one of the things, a story that came back to me this morning, and what we've all been talking about, is a couple of years ago, I was working in a garden program at Davis Early Learning Center here in town. It's up in the Bordeaux neighborhood. And one of the students told me, I was doing like a research project where I was just recording kind of what they were saying, so I could go back and listen to it and really reflect on it. And one of the students came up to me and he was saying something about caterpillars. And I was like, man, that's such a good point. Like, you're a really good scientist. And he looks at me, he's like, I am a good scientist. And then he makes he's like, and now I'm gonna go shoot all the bad scientists. And that hit me. I was like, oh no, because we're outdoors and in the neighborhood, a lot of times you can hear people talking about all kind of different things. There's fire trucks going by, there's police cars going by, there's dogs barking, it's just everything. And on the you know, it's an early learning center, but even there, they have posters on the wall about like what to do with a school shooter, you know? So the kids, they're aware of this and they're playing these games that we want to silence to kind of play. But then he goes off and he's like, I'm gonna go shoot all the bad scientists. And my initial response was like, oh, no, like we got to shut this down. But what I really stopped and thought about, and I've tried to do this in the intervening years, is hear it in a different way, and think about this kid as like, this is a superhero right here. Like if we had somebody that could go and like be a good scientist and get rid of all the bad scientists, like science and the world and science education would be really different places if we included the ethical component first and foremost.
Yeah, Tyree, it was brilliant that I called on you because one, you did, you know, the first thing you started with is you're trying to drink from a fire hose. This is a lot to take in. But here's what I will tell you. The fact that you're sitting with it and grappling with it is the first step in actually resolving it for yourself, one. Two, the way you resolve it today may not be the way you resolve it in 10 years or 5 years, because we are ever evolving in our understanding of our own humanity, other people, what it means to be an anti-racist educator. What it looked like for me 5 years ago is not what it looks like today. What I would just tell you is be willing to be in that inquiry with yourself and with other people, because it evolves. Like I said in the last conversation, everybody wants things to get handled. Like somehow you're going to get to the mountaintop of anti-racist or culture responsive or whatever, because you're right, it is a responsive. It is responding, not reacting and not acquiescing. It's a responding, which implies it is dynamic. So the fact that you are questioning your ideas when the little dude did the bad scientist thing, and I got the fear of just like, y'all don't do that because, you know, we don't want you to be mistaken. You know what I mean? There is sometimes where you have to disrupt things just because of safety. But then at the same time, you can get curious. Like, what did he really mean by that? And, you know, and then he'll tell you. And then you'll see that maybe where he was coming from was not what we thought. But I can definitely hear sometimes you do have to stop children just from harm. You know, right? You don't want anything to come negative to people because somebody misinterpreted what they said or anything like that. So I totally get the balance of I need to protect you, but at the same time, I need to understand where you're coming from, which is just what it means to be human. And sometimes you'll quote, get it wrong. And I use that in quotes because I don't get it wrong is just an interpretation. You did the best you could with what you knew at the time. And then when you know better, you do better. And that Maya Angelou said, when you know better, you do better. But you'll never know better unless you're willing to get on the skinny branches. See, the knowing better comes from the engaging and the responding. And the whoop, that didn't work. Okay, let me back up. You know what I mean? And that's going to always be the case as a teacher. If you ever are trying to handle your teaching, this ain't the profession for you. It's just not. Because human beings are dynamic. Where one kid is today may not be where they are tomorrow. The kid that was your best friend today might be pissed off at you the next day. Like all of this is what happens in classrooms. But we try to operationalize human beings as if there's a way to do that. And that is what I find problematic, particularly with Black and brown children. We're always trying to classroom manage them, managing me. Don't freaking manage me. Engage with me. Stop trying to manage everybody. Trust me, if you build relationships that are really mutually beneficial and are mutually respectable, you don't have to manage. I've never had a problem with classroom management. I don't even know what that's about. Like, I taught at Northwestern High School in Baltimore City where people smoke weed in the hall, okay? And I never had that issue. You know why? Because I'm not trying to manage you. I'm trying to teach you. I'm trying to partner with you in your education. To me, that's the most racist thing you can do to anybody, is to make them into an object to be managed. And people resist that. Think about me trying to manage y'all. Who can manage y'all? Nobody. Your own husband can't manage you, or your own wife can't manage. You know what I mean? So the idea that we're out here trying to manage everybody is the first issue, because we're not treating them as human beings. I keep going back to, you better understand humanity before you get into these teaching streets, because you're dealing with human beings. You're not dealing with clogs in a chug or something. You're not dealing with that. And if you're not okay with that, this may not be the place for you to be. And particularly when you're dealing with the psychology of people who've been marginalized, they are highly intuitive, particularly Black children. They know when you're not for them. You ain't got to say it, but they know it, because you learn that skill. As a person who came from the hood, you learn how to read people real quick. You can't fake it. You can't front with it, because they've been trained to know where people are coming from. That's their survival, right? So you got to deal with yourself. Where are you coming from when you talk to that child? Are you really making them wrong in the problem? Don't pretend you're not. Sometimes I had to tell students, like, you know what? I really am making you a problem, because the way you're behaving is just really problematic for me. And I apologize. Let's talk, because I don't want that relationship with you. But right now, that's all I got, because you keep coming for me. And I don't understand why, because I'm not coming for you. And they'll tell you. It could be something you said 5 days ago. They be like, you know what, Miss Ellington, I ain't like what you said, so and so and so. Oh, I apologize. I didn't even know you were still holding that. But you got to be telling the truth. You got to be authentic. You got to be willing to be vulnerable with people and tell people where you are, particularly children. They'll respect you for it. Like I shared the story about Jamal in my other meeting, where he used to give me the blues when I taught at Northwestern. I mean, he was a something. And one day I just told him, I said, look, I don't know how to get through to you. Like, I really am committed that you be a part of this, but I just don't know what to do. Like, you got to tell me, what are you interested in? What matters to you? And he shared with me that he liked music. And I said, well, look, would you partner with me in helping bring in what you're interested in and what I'm doing? Because I don't want to be at odds with you. That's not my commitment. The next day, totally different person, just by me having that conversation. And if anybody came for me, he'd be the first one, be like, don't be coming for Miss Ellington. She all right, y'all. I had no idea that's what he was going to do. But it was something about our collective humanity, and he got that it really mattered to me that we're not up in arms. I don't want to be at odds with you. But there are certain behaviors that I need you to take on just to make this classroom work. So let's talk about it. Let's negotiate it. That's when you are non-racist, because now you're not putting people in a box. You're dealing with them as human beings. And it's funny, when I have friends who had their kids in like the friend school, that's how white children are treated in high elite environments, like people. But in the hood, we treating everybody like they don't try to, there's not even a classroom management conversation at Sidwell Friends. But in the hood, that's all we talking about. Because they're already looked at as human beings. They're high income white children. You're chilling. Now, when you talk about low income white children, you get a little different, because you got the economic piece. But high income white children are treated like human beings. Black low income children in the hood are treated like commodities, things to manage, things to control. And of course, there's a history of slavery. All of it comes from there, but we got to disrupt that. And to me, it starts with really honoring people's humanity. That's where I keep going back to. If I treat you like a human being, then you get an opinion, I get an opinion. You get to have your view, I get to have mine, and we can meet in the middle. That's what human beings do when you relate to each other as human beings.
I saw, Melinda, you came off of mute earlier. Wanted to make sure you had a chance to voice a question if you had one.
Oh, I didn't realize that, but I'll just go ahead. I am an elementary exceptional special ed teacher. And this is a math question.
Okay.
And math, I feel like, is not a strength for me, at least in teaching it. And going back to the video that I saw before this with all three of y'all, and Dr. Lassen Billings had talked about the most anti-racist thing that you can do is teach to the fullest potential, or work with that child to get them to their fullest potential. And I feel like in math, I'm not doing it. They're making progress. I'm incorporating their interests. I ask them for feedback all the time. They share things with me all the time, but I just feel like I'm missing something. And do you just have any kind of general advice for
no,
the
I don't
math
have to.
piece?
Can I ask you a question? Because I'm
Yes,
curious.
ma'am.
What evidence are you using to judge yourself as not equipped? So what is the conversation in your head that's giving you this world of I'm not doing this the best? Like what is that? What are you using as evidence?
I think because with reading, I feel like I when I'm doing my reading instruction, I'm doing more, I'm being more creative. I feel like I could really figure out what areas they may really need help on, and I can try different things. But with math, I just feel like it's very formulaic. There's not as much creativity for me. So that's why I feel that way. And like I said, they are making progress, but I just want to make sure I'm doing
So
the best that I could do
that
for them.
notion of mathematics is not being creative and formulaic is the
Yeah.
problem. That's how we've been trained to think of math. I'm a mathematician, and outside of what school math is not what I do. Like that, what we do with people is boxing them in. So one, I say bring the level of creativity and vision you have in your reading instruction to your math instruction. So what we have done with mathematics is decontextualized it to make it this formulaic process. Yes, there are systems and rules of math, just like there are in English, right? I was a math and English major. Most people don't know that. I majored in math and English. People thought I was crazy. But what I'm doing both of those together, I realized that English is very formulaic, just like math is, but at least in English, we don't take out the context. See, in math, we take out the context. So you need to bring that same creativity and context to your math instructions, the same way you do in English. The only difference is the language of mathematics is numeric and formulaic, but the ideas, the creativity, the thinking is still appropriate. So I think it's your view of what math is and how to teach it that might be having you in these boxes. Like I do English this way, I do reading this way, I do math this way. They actually have a lot in common. Because math is a language. And when you understand the language of mathematics, it really does help you see the world in a particular way. So that's where I want you to start coming from in your math instruction. And then, of course, partner with your students. Tell them the truth. Like, look, y'all, I have all this creativity over here. Here's where I got. So what do y'all think? And they'll give you ideas about how to bring a certain context to the teaching and learning of mathematics that you naturally bring to reading. Because when you read a book, of course, there's context, right? You don't just say a whole bunch of words and put them together. But with math, we've reduced it to that. But as mathematicians, we know that's not true. When you get to a certain level, all it is words and logic and proofs and understanding the system, the topology, right? So what we do is we disenfranchise kids to know what math is because we make it that way. It ain't that way, actually. It's very creative. It's very applicable. It helps you understand the world in a particular way. You can bring in your reading understanding with your mathematical knowledge. Me being in both of those disciplines has changed the game for me. I see the logic in things and I see the context in things. So you just got to change your view of what math is for you and partner with your students in letting them bring their level of creativity by bringing in the context.
Courtney, I hope that gets to your question about context as well. We do have our 30-second warning. That means our Q&A with our panelists is over. Thank you, Dr. Ellington. We're so grateful for your time. We're so grateful for your wisdom and your lived experiences and your research experiences. Our next step in our time together is going to be some accountability groups with some reflection pieces. You're welcome to be a fly on the wall, to just sit back and listen, or you're welcome to go on about your Saturday. Participants, we will be whisked away into the main room. Greg will say some whole group things, and then you'll have your choice of what reflection or accountability group to be put in. What 2 will have like teaching focuses, 2 will have like community focuses. So you can start thinking of like which community you fit in, and then we'll see what it looks like for next steps and where we want to take this work.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so humbled and I appreciate
Thank you so much, Dr. Ellington.
To teachers.
Thank you.
I got 59 seconds. Anything else anybody want to say or just heard?
Any last words?
No, any last words? Nothing you want to say? Kyra, what you want to say? We can't hear you though. And you're not on mute. I don't know. What you got? Some raggedy phone? What's going on?
Okay.
Kara, you were perfect. What happened? I don't know. I guess.
Kara, type as quickly as possible.
Well, thank you. Y'all keep doing what you're doing. I just want to leave you with just, it's messy, y'all. It's messy. It's never handled. And that's okay. Because I tell people when it's handled, we're throwing dirt in your face. See, when life gets handled, you're done. We at the funeral, we saying, your name was on a little card, right? So just know that the fact that it's messy.
Going on processing those videos and get them up as soon as I can.